And Cash, you and I was serving on the Intelligence Committee when you worked on the Intelligence Committee. And John, you and I are both from Texas, and we both served together on the Intelligence Committee. The idea that this information, if it was presented to our committee, would not be classified, y'all know is a lie. That's ridiculous. I've seen things much less sensitive be presented to us with high classification. And to say that it isn't is a lie to the country. I want to ask the generals now. The NSA is principally in charge of intercepting things like signals intelligence from other countries. General, I want to ask you, if your organization, your agency, intercepted something like this from Russia or China or some other country, would you consider this classified information?
Representative, we would be classifying based off of our sources and methods. So those would be the things that, in terms of how we process, how we would be able to obtain the information, and how we'd report it,
Sure.
We would classify based off of our source and method.
So if you knew that the Secretary of Defense and the National Security Advisor of Russia or China and the head of the Foreign Ministry and all of the folks who were associated with that signal chain, if you intercepted that information, General, would you consider it classified?
So it would be classified based off of our collection.
So the NSA would classify it, would
Based
determine
off
it as classified.
the protection of our own source and method, not necessarily based off the content, but how we collected that information.
But it would be classified.
Well, we certainly wouldn't be collecting on a U.S. person conversation.
No, I understand. I'm
We're
saying if you did your job and collected it from the Russian Foreign Ministry and the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of Defense and the President's Chief Advisor, there is no way, having sat on this committee for 9 years, that somebody would come in with that information and give us something that says, unclassified, you can walk out of this room with this information and give it to whomever you want. You know, with all respect, you and I worked on the committee at the same time. Tulsi, you and I came in together. I've never had an issue of beef with you. John, you and I are both from Texas. Y'all know that's a lie. It's a lie to the country. I want to ask about the Alien Enemies Act really quick while I have time. The President has used the Alien Enemies Act, a wartime authority last used to detain German and Japanese nationals during World War II, to summarily deport people accused of being members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Agua. To invoke this law, the President must demonstrate that the United States is under invasion by a foreign nation or government. They have alleged that we are under invasion by the Venezuelan government. The idea that we are at war with Venezuela would come as a surprise to most Americans. The unclassified version of the annual threat assessment the intelligence community just released makes no mention of any invasion or war that we are fighting with the nation of Venezuela. You would think our nation being at war would merit at least a small reference in this threat assessment. And Director Ratcliffe, does the intelligence community assess that we are currently at war or being invaded by the nation of Venezuela?
We have no assessment that says that.
Thank you. In invoking the law, the President alleged that Tren de Agua is, quote, undertaking hostile actions against the U.S. at the direction, clandestine or otherwise, of the Maduro regime in Venezuela. Director Gabbard, does the intelligence community assess that the Venezuelan government is directing Tren de Agua's hostile actions against the United States?
There are varied assessments that came from different intelligence community elements. I'll defer to Director Patel to speak specifically to the FBI assessment.
But let me ask you, so you're saying there are conflicting assessments that have come from the IC?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. We'll take it up in closed session. All right. You know, your threat assessment makes issue of, highlights fentanyl trafficking as a top threat to the United States, yet support for law enforcement cooperation with Mexico has been put on hold, and there's been a threat of invasion to Mexico by the United States. You assess that Russia's advanced cyber capabilities make it a persistent counterintelligence cyber threat yet the administration shut down the unit at the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Agency tasked with stopping Russian cyber attacks. There are so many other ways that the actions of this administration have contradicted this threat assessment, and the administration is making the world and the United States more dangerous. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Chairman Crawford. Thank you to all of our witnesses for being here. I look forward to working with each and every one of you to keep our country and our planet safe. I wanted to carry on the topic of Section 702 reauthorization. Representative LaHood and I did a lot of work on this over the past 2 years. As you all know, last Congress, this committee worked in a bipartisan manner to advance the reauthorization of what most of us, if not all, deem to be our country's single and most important national security tool. The result was what was titled the Reforming Intelligence and Securing America Act, which not only reauthorized Section 702, but equally important, it provided necessary reforms to our intelligence community in an effort to address past abuses. This was the largest single reform of the FBI and the IC in a generation, making sure that there are appropriate compliance guardrails that enhance accountability while still protecting the critical tools necessary for our nation's security. Just to name a few, in 2009, Section 702 protected our nation from an attack by an al-Qaeda member who intended to detonate explosives in the Manhattan subway lines. In 2014, Section 702 helped prevent attacks by assisting in the removal of ISIS leader Haji Imam. In 2022, Section 702 contributed to the U.S. government's operation against the last remaining 9/11 architect, Ayman al-Zawahiri. And as we saw in the horrendous attacks of October 7th, an attack on the people of Israel, where Hamas killed over 1,200 innocent civilians, intelligence collection is essential to the safety and security of our population. We must never, ever see another attack the likes of 9/11, especially as a result of a self-inflicted intelligence failure. Not reauthorizing the use of this authority in this coming year would intentionally and willingly put the United States at a disadvantage against actors who seek our destruction. Representative LaHood touched on the warrant requirement. As you all know, that is really the linchpin here. And I think it's abundantly clear for members of this committee, members of this Congress, and for members of our Intelligence Committee to understand that a warrant requirement is on the collection of data. A warrant requirement cannot apply to the querying of already lawfully collected data. To follow that theory to its logical extreme would be to say that a police department who has an evidence locker containing lawfully collected data has to get a warrant to re-enter that evidence locker. It'd be akin to say to a police officer they cannot run a license plate, which is querying off of lawfully collected Department of Transportation data without getting a warrant. It would shut down the courts. It would shut down law enforcement. It would make our country much less safe. So I want to ask Director Patel, Director Radcliffe, I want to yield the floor to you as we will be working with all of you, particularly your two agencies on reauthorization, to share your thoughts.
So it's great to see you, sir, and thanks for the question. Look, on 702, just to flesh out some of the more specific operational use that I have it with specifically relates to what you just said. When I was a terrorism prosecutor, we used 702 directly to prevent the shopping mall in Houston from being blown up. We used 702 collection directly to prevent an attack on the state capitol in the state of California. And those individuals were prosecuted and are currently in prison. And balancing that awesome responsibility with the constitutional protections that every American should have when we're talking about U.S. persons specifically is something that I keep in mind on every single decision surrounding 702. But as Director Radcliffe stated, and has been my experience, while I understand and appreciate the concerns for the warrant requirement based on U.S. persons, if there is a solution that allows that to happen in real time, then we can have that discussion. But I have not encountered one, and thus it obviates the need in my perspective, in my mission set to protect the American people and hunt down criminals in its application. So where it is now with the reforms y'all have implemented, we've done a great job on protecting American civil liberties, and I'm always open to, and I do believe we can do some more.
Director Radcliffe.
Good to see you again, Congressman. I agree with Director Patel's comments with regard to that. I'll start out by saying, obviously, in this role, I'm not a policymaker. But at the appropriate time, when this comes up for renewal, I think I made it clear and will make it clear from the CIA's perspective the indispensability of 702 as a tool to providing the commander-in-chief an accurate picture of the threat environment. You mentioned some examples of 702 success. When we get into the classified session later this afternoon, I have some further examples of 702 success that we can talk about, and I think that reflects my position.
Thank you all. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. Mr. Krishnamurthy.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for coming. Thank you for your service. Director Gabbard, you said no classified information was included in the signal chat, correct?
That's correct.
And President Trump also said there was no classified information in the signal chat, and Secretary Hegseth said nobody was texting war plans. There was absolutely no classified info in that chat. Lieutenant General Cruz, I'd like to talk to you about a couple things real quick. Executive Order 13526, Section 1.4a. This is the Trump administration's executive order with regard to classified information. It says, information shall be classified if its unauthorized disclosure could reasonably be expected to cause damage to national security, including military plans, weapons systems, or operations. You don't disagree that that's accurately quoted, right?
That's an accurate quote from the executive order.
And DOD 5200.01, this is the DOD's manual on classification, says, quote, information shall be classified if its unauthorized disclosure could reasonably be expected to cause describable damage to national security. This includes military plans, weapon systems, or operations. You don't disagree that I quoted that accurately, right?
That's also an accurate quote.
Can I show you I'd like to show you the text that Secretary Hegseth actually published to the world. Now, Lieutenant General Cruz, as Ranking Member Himes said, it says, time now, weather is favorable, just confirmed with CENTCOM we are a go for mission launch. Then it says at 12:15 Eastern, F-18's launch, first strike package. F-18s are military systems, correct? Weapon systems.
They are.
Okay. 1345, trigger-based F-18 first strike window starts. Target terrorist is at his known location, so should be on time. Also, strike drones launch, MQ-9s. MQ-9s is a weapon system, correct?
They are.
Okay. I think applying the executive order as well as the DOD manual to this fact pattern, we clearly have weapon systems that have been identified. That is classified information. Now, the reason why it's important that this information not be disclosed is that we don't want the adversaries to know what's about to happen, right, sir?
Well, I would draw a small distinction there. You referenced and asked if that platform, those two platforms, are weapon systems. They are, but those terms are used all across the globe in a lot of contexts. So it's really about how they're used in the context of this particular document. I just want to clarify that the use of those.
I understand.
Yeah.
In this situation, those are operational details.
They are operational details, but again, as you quoted the DOD instruction, it's about operations. So as you further go down into what are the operational details, I think as we had a discussion yesterday, the important aspect, I think all of us are very familiar.
This is classified information. This is classified information. It's a weapon system as well as sequence of strikes as well as details about the operations. And so I think that just piggybacking off of what some other members have said, using the DOD's manual as well as the executive order in operation today with the Trump administration, this text message is clearly classified information. Secretary Hegseth has disclosed military plans as well as classified information. He needs to resign immediately. He needs to resign immediately, and a full investigation needs to be undertaken with regard to whether other similar signal chats are occurring in this administration. I'd like to turn my attention to another topic. Director Patel, according to the DOJ, in 2022, the FBI led Joint Terrorism Task Force, JTTF, in my hometown of Chicago, valiantly led efforts to prevent a plot to attack Naval Station Great Lakes in Illinois. You don't dispute that, do you, sir?
I'm not familiar with it, but I don't dispute what you're telling me.
Thank you. A memo obtained by ABC 7 News of Chicago said that this task force will now be, quote, actively supporting, close quote, the Department of Homeland Security and its immigration enforcement. You don't dispute that either, do you?
I'm just not familiar with it, sir.
Okay. Sir, I just have to say, the DOJ has now tasked JTTFs to shift some resources to immigration enforcement efforts. And I don't say this lightly, if there's a terrorist attack anywhere in the country, including in Chicago, and it was because the JTTFs in part shifted resources, they'll be held to pay. Thank you, sir.
Gentleman's time's expired. Gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Gabbard, was the target terrorist named in the text, or was it simply referred to as target terrorist?
The target was not named.
Thank you. Was the location named?
Congressman, no locations were named.
Thank you. Director Patel, there was a specific accusation made about how close we are working with Mexico currently. My understanding, and I want to congratulate you on this, and I think it shows a shift of focus at the FBI since you've taken over to what it should have been doing all along, which is chasing the 10 most wanted that are threatening our country. My understanding is that 2 of the 3 were actually arrested in Mexico and are being extradited back to the United States. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We have been working. One of the first meetings I took as FBI director was my counterpart, Secretary Farouche in Mexico. And subsequent to that, we have repaid or extradited or expelled from Mexico 2 top 10 of the FBI's most wanted list and 33 other criminals.
Well, it sounds to me like we're working closer with them today than we have in the last several years, and that the focus of the FBI has shifted to actually protecting American citizens instead of arresting pro-life protesters.
Our mission is to find violent criminals wherever they are, and if they're in Mexico, we're going to get them.
Thank you. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate the change in the focus of the FBI. I want to talk with you a little bit about the counterintelligence threats, one of which was an active-duty U.S. Army soldier charged with conspiring to transmit national defense information to individuals located in China. What can you say in this setting, or can you briefly explain your work with interagency partners to identify and neutralize counterintelligence threats in the United States around this example?
For me, sir?
Yes, sir.
So generally speaking, on counterintelligence and countering espionage, whether it's from adversaries like the CCP, Russia, Iran, or otherwise, we have prioritized them as an equally violent criminal enterprise seeking to do harm to our critical infrastructure and also to exploit and steal our data, whether it's government or private personnel. And so we have expanded our resources into them and working with the interagency to make it a priority.
Okay, thank you. I want to move on to the issue of the threshold of parole under the previous administration and the number of illegal immigrants that have come into this country, including people with known membership in terrorist groups. For those individuals that pose a risk and that we have captured and are being deported, are we sharing the biometric and biographic information with our allies to mitigate their ability to relocate or operate abroad?
What we are doing at the FBI is sharing the information we're allowed to with our Five Eye partners, and then on an individual basis, we are trying to share information with other partners who deemed individuals that they find of consequence.
Okay. As you move further into your position, if you have additional recommendations on how we better share information, please let us know.
Yes, sir.
Director Ratcliffe, China's influence on the Panama Canal has increased since 2017. Panama became the first Latin American country to sign on to China's Belt and Road Initiative. Can you talk about not just China embedding itself into the various canal-related sectors and operations, but what other areas in Central and South America have China and others increased their presence, and what examples concern you the most?
Thanks, Congressman. Appreciate the question. I do want to comment. The question before about cooperation with Mexico, it's really across the IC. When Mexico's Secretary General Omar Harfuch, head of Mexican security, was here, he not only met with Director Patel, he met with Director Gabbard, and he met with me. So we have been working on that, again, to the benefit of both our countries. To your point, the PRC throughout Central and South America continues to attempt to use its soft power to gain a foothold. They use direct aid to countries that need it. They also provide funding to universities to get a foothold to create influence. And you mentioned the Panama Canal, and you've seen the diplomatic efforts of the administration to address that and push back on PRC ownership of the canal locks. But that ties into what the IC is doing. In these instances, it's important for us, Congressman, to the best way we can operate is to provide intelligence to countries in Central and South America, to provide them with briefings, which we do, to provide them with tailored analysis of our intelligence about how China is manipulating them, about how China is hacking them, the things that China is doing to gain a foothold, and Russia and Iran throughout that area. So the CIA is very much focused on that.
Gentleman's time's expired. Mr. Crow.
Thank you, Chairman. General Hawk, the NSA recently warned its employees not to use this